What is going on, everybody? Welcome back to another episode of Bug of the Week. Once again, on this episode of our journey through all of the insect orders, we have arrived at the iconic, the one and only Mantodea, also known as praying mantises. But before we get into it, as always, if you are new here, consider leaving a like and subscribing if you enjoyed this episode, and as well as leaving a comment of your new favorite fun fact about these bugs. And yeah, we're going to talk about praying mantises today. One of my very favorite. I know I say that almost every week, but I've been into praying mantises from a very young age. They've always been one of my favorite. They're so personable and charismatic, and they are really cool. The order Mantodea is made up of about 8 families and 2,500 species worldwide. So, first of all, the name. Mantodea, kind of unexciting. It is derived from mantis, the Greek word for these insects. So no fun etymology of entomology today. It's just the Greek name for them because they're very iconic. They've been named for a very long time, obviously. First of all, let's get some of their general information out of the way, starting off with their development. These insects are hemimetabolists, as is with all of the other insects we've talked about so far. We're almost to the holometabolist insects, but we'll get there. Hemimetabolists, incomplete 3-stage metamorphosis with an egg, then to a nymph, then to adult. The eggs are pretty cool, which we'll get into in a little bit, but before that, let's get over their anatomy. Starting off with the head, they have filiform, thread-like antennae, nothing crazy there. They have a triangular head with very large, well-developed compound eyes. They have mandibulate hypognathous mouthparts, meaning the mouthparts face downwards. They have an elongate prothorax, which is this kind of neck-looking area of their bodies. They have 2 pairs of wings, as is with all insects, with the front set being hard and thickened, and the fan-like, softer hind wings that they use for flying. By the way, this thickened, leathery-like forewing is called tegmina. We saw the same thing back in the Dermaptera episode. The earwigs have a similar thing. It's called tegmina. Next, their tarsi, or their feet, are 5-segmented. They have short, multi-segmented cerci on the end of their abdomen, but they're oftentimes covered up by their wings. And finally, the most iconic feature of the praying mantises are their raptorial forelegs that they use for catching prey. So yes, that's right. These arm-looking things are actually one of their sets of legs. It's their front legs, and they are highly modified with spikes. But if you look at the end of them, they still do have the tarsi that they use for walking. So if you ever see a praying mantis walking around, they're oftentimes using those front legs to walk. But if they're hunting, they will be standing on their other 2 sets of legs with their front legs up in a hunting position. So yes, those are just modified legs that they use for hunting. And when legs are modified for hunting and catching prey like this, we call those raptorial forelegs. So yes, praying mantises are very easily identifiable, very iconic looking, pretty easy to differentiate from other insects because they're just so unique. There are some really cool fun facts about the mantises. So they're the only insects that are able to turn their heads from side to side without moving any other part of their body. Because of that ability to sort of give expressions, a lot of people think that mantises are very intelligent, but they're really not any more intelligent than any other insects would be. But another reason they look kind of more personable is because they have this little pigment spot on their compound eyes, which kind of looks like a pupil. So it kind of looks like they have eyeballs like a human does, and those spots can move around sometimes. And that's just simply light refracting off their ommatidia, which are the lenses in their compound eyes. But that's not a pupil, it just kind of looks like one, which is part of why mantises are so personable. Now, one of the more iconic and interesting things about praying mantises is their courtship. Male mantises will put on elaborate displays involving their wings, cool patterns on their legs, and sort of dancing for the female to gain her approval. And one of the more iconic things is that during mating, the females will oftentimes eat the males. And you might be wondering, like, why does that even happen? Like, how is that even able to persist in the population? That's a pretty bad trait, like being eaten by your mate. Praying mantises are cool because they actually have a lot of strategies for why this is a good thing. First of all, from a purely nutritional perspective, eating your mate as a female is a lot of food for your babies, so it actually ensures a higher success rate for the eggs. That's one thing. Another thing, this might be a little bit TMI, but it's actually been shown that if the female eats the male during mating, he actually deposits more sperm in the end, which is really, really weird and interesting, and that's the reason why this trait persists in the population. Okay, let's talk about some cool praying mantises. As is with the order we talked about last week, the phasmids, mantids are often cryptically colored, meaning they're really good at blending in and disguising themselves as other things. For example, this is not a stick insect. This is a twig praying mantis. That's right. They look just like a twig and also a stick insect. So if you see one walking around, you might think, oh, that's just a stick insect. But no. See those raptorial forelegs? This is a praying mantis. Also, a big difference between phasmids and mantids is mantids are carnivorous, so they hunt other insects, which we'll talk about a little more in just a second. But moving on, here's one that looks just like a flower. This is an orchid mantis, bright purple, and it's not to warn predators, it's actually to blend in because they will sit on orchids and wait for insects to come by. So yeah, many of them will disguise as flowers, twigs, sticks, green leaves, foliage. They are also masters of disguise, just like the phasmids are. Now, another thing that we haven't really talked about much, but arises in the mantids, is the presence of an egg casing, also known as an ootheca. An ootheca is an egg case that an insect makes to further protect the eggs from the natural elements. So when the female is laying eggs, it's actually a pretty cool thing to watch because she kind of uses her abdomen like a 3D printer, and she will lay down layers of this foamy substance while laying her eggs inside of this package. And this foamy substance then solidifies and is a very efficient barrier and insulation for her eggs to develop. She will lay dozens, sometimes hundreds of eggs in one of these oothecae. Oothecae? Is it oothecae? In one of these egg cases. And so then when the babies hatch, they are immediately hungry, and thus begins a sibling warfare cannibal party. I mean, these little tiny praying mantises start just eating each other like nothing else to try and get away and get a best start at life. So she lays a lot of eggs. Some of them might not make it, but they are, praying mantises are voracious cannibals, in case you didn't get that so far. Going through life, praying mantises are very adept hunters. They are apex predators in the world of the insects. They're very good at catching their prey. They do not use venom. They strictly just eat their prey alive. So it's pretty brutal to watch. But they feed mostly on insects, although there have been some rare cases where some larger species have caught small vertebrates like small frogs and hummingbirds, and they too will eat those alive. It's pretty brutal to watch, but they will stalk their prey, and you can see them bob back and forth. And although we're not completely positive what that's for, the thought is that they are actually measuring the distance. They're getting they're using their depth perception and getting a good idea of how far away their prey is. So they will do this bob, and then once the prey item moves just a little bit, it'll strike and grab it and rip it apart with its raptorial forelegs. They typically instantly start eating the legs off first so that it can't get away, and then continue to eat the rest of the body. So how are they able to do this? Well, their big, huge compound eyes are really good at hunting. Typically, if you see something that has really big compound eyes, it's typically searching for something specific, and that is the case for mantises. They are searching for their prey item of choice. So that, in conjunction with the fact that scientists have studied the brains of praying mantises, and they have found that this little ganglia, which is part of their insect brain, called the central complex, is especially large in the mantises. The central complex is the part of the insect brain that is responsible for movement coordination and navigation, which makes sense with how adept praying mantises are at striking their prey. If you want to learn more about the insect brain, I made a video about it. There's a link up there for it after you're done watching this one. But insect brains are really cool, and that in conjunction with their compound eyes are two things that make praying mantises such great hunters. So as you can see, I love praying mantises. They are very cool. I've loved them for a long time. Always been one of my favorite to catch. They're great pets. They're very fun to watch grow, fun to watch hunt. They just don't live very long. They grow really fast. They're not very long living. That's the only bummer. But other than that, they're very fun to keep. Really cool, charismatic little bugs. With that, I hope you all enjoyed watching this episode of Bug of the Week. Mantises are one of my very favorite. If you enjoyed it, definitely leave a like, subscribe, and leave a comment of your favorite fact about the praying mantises, maybe even one that I missed. Definitely tune in next week where I'm going to be talking about Mantodea, also known as the cockroaches. You don't want to miss that one. That one's going to be really fun, because I'm sure there are some things about roaches that people don't like, but I'm going to try and convince you otherwise because they're very cool. But with that, I will see you all next week, but until then, keep on bugging. See ya.